the Awanachi conversations. These are real life conversations. I'm super excited that you could make time to join me on this week's podcast. And like we said, this month we have a series of men that are actually coming through to the podcast. If you are a follower of, and you've liked and subscribed to a YouTube channel, you may have noticed that most, if not all of our guests have been female. But we thought, well, let's bring the men onto the conversation. And we're doing this special season where we're having the men come on board as well. Well, on the conversations today, we are joined by a remarkable individual whose life's journey is nothing short of transformative. Daniel Mbazima is the owner of Sanity Sobriety House, a safe house for people that are battling addiction. His personal story is one of resilience and redemption, having faced the darkest depths of addiction himself and having been expelled from 2 universities and nearly lost himself to substance abuse. Now, what more than a person who has walked this journey to come through to the show and just share with us insights around alcohol addiction, drug abuse, and all things that happen around that aspect. Now he is actually a substance abuse activist. He's a public health specialist. He's an addiction recovery coach. He's now dedicated his life actually to help others break from the barriers of addiction, from the chains of addiction. And through his work, he has been able to change so many lives. And we thought, Daniel, come through to the podcast and let's just have a conversation. So Daniel Mbazima, thank you so much for coming to the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So glad to have you. I know you're extremely busy. You kept telling us, okay, I'll see if I can make it. But just seeing you here means a lot. And we're looking forward to this conversation. And just to kick the ball rolling, Daniel, I think your story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. Could you take us through that moment that you were going through this addiction and you discovered that it was consuming you and you had to take the turning point?
For me, my turning point was when I wanted to commit suicide. Yeah, so what had happened is I had lost a friend in the neighborhood, and this was my childhood friend, pretty much the only guy that was by my side when I was going through what I was going through. I must mention that during my addiction, I did, steal a lot to support my addiction. I lied, I manipulated people, and I sort of pushed everybody away. But I only had that one person that was by my side besides family. And when he passed on, I went for his funeral, and I just met everybody that I grew up with. And these are, people from church. My dad is a pastor, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So you know what they say about pastors' kids, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
the PK.
I was one of those. Yeah. Not all of them are bad, but I was that guy. Yeah. And I just met everybody, and there are times when people look at you without mentioning anything, and you can interpret what their thoughts are. So I could see how everybody was disappointed in me, and I began to look through my life and everything that happened, and I decided, look, I think it's about time to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to note that it had to take a death of somebody who's very close and very dear to you for you to realize that you needed to make a change. But could you take us through the journey? You were expelled from 2 universities. That doesn't happen. But here you are today. Could you take us through the journey? How did this addiction start? Take us through the steps for you to have gotten to that point of full addiction.
So I was studying medicine. Yeah, I was studying medicine, and
where is that?
That was in Russia.
Okay, in Russia.
So I was a medical student in Russia. It started out of curiosity. Yeah, it started out of curiosity. But when I trace back to where it comes from, it's because I've always felt the need to seek validation. So I was bullied as a child, and those are some of the things that really, really affected me. I was that type of kid who, when you're choosing people to play soccer with, they'll choose me last. So I never felt like I was good enough. And it mainly started out of curiosity. I started with alcohol, and I didn't know what I know now, that there are actually three types of people that drink. So we have the first classes are social drinkers who can drink and control their drinking. And then we have the second classes are people who abuse alcohol, mainly due to lack of economic support, lack of knowledge, lack of skills. And they grew up in this sort of lifestyle where drinking is normal. But if you take such a person, you give him a job, you give him something to do, they'll instantly change. Now, I fell under the third class. So I'm known as an alcoholic. What that simply means is I cannot simply handle my alcohol. So when I started drinking, it started affecting me. And what happens with an alcoholic is the first thing that goes down is your relationships. That's what suffers. Then second, your finances. You spend all your money on it. Then your health. You stop eating. Your hygiene goes down. The state of your mental health goes down. Your occupation gets affected. In that time, my occupation was school. And then you resort to inferior environments and inferior companionships. Then there's a blacking out, loss of memory, forced landing, the fights. And when that happened with me, I was like, okay, alcohol is not good for me. And then I realized that some of my friends were taking heroin and cocaine. And I started with heroin and cocaine, and I loved it because in the beginning, it's always nice because you find it gives you a high compared to nothing on earth. So there is something known as dopamine, the dopamine effect.
Dopamine,
I will explain a bit about it so people get to understand the genesis of addiction. So dopamine, the way it works, on a day you wake up on your left, they say the left side of the bed, or you wake up and you're not in a good mood, would say your dopamine is at 40. On a normal day, would say your dopamine is at 50. Now, there are certain things that increase a person's dopamine levels, such as food and other things. But the highest level of dopamine a human being can get is about 120, somewhere there. Yeah, for figure's sake. And very few people achieve that dopamine. So maybe you're president for the first time, you win the lotto. Those are people who go up to there. Most people end up in the hundreds, somewhere there, just for statistics for people to understand. But cocaine and heroin raise your dopamine to about 1,200. So when you start taking drugs, that's the high that you feel.
Wow.
Now, one won't be enough. Next time you need about 3. 3 won't be enough. You need about 5. And your brain will be like, you're secreting so much dopamine. Calm down. Yeah. But in that process, you're slowly getting addicted. You're increasing your dosage and everything. And that's pretty much what got to happen. So from heroin and cocaine, I moved to codeine. I moved to marijuana. And I was an all-round user. So that was how my addiction started. 4th year, it got so bad, the school noticed that was my first expulsion. Yeah. Was given another chance, went back to different university to start all over again. But when I went back, I stopped partying, I stopped mingling with friends, I stopped interacting, but I didn't stop using. So that led to my second expulsion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's not every day we hear such stories. We see such stories, Daniel, in the movies, and that's the reality. And that's why when we saw the work that you're doing, we thought, let's have a conversation around this and see how, we can help each other. Now, you are in the space of, an addiction recovery coach. How would you describe, as a country, as Zambia, where are we in terms of alcohol and drug abuse?
It's bad. It's really, really bad. Late last year, we were moving around the country with some people from Sanity House, which is the rehabilitation center which I run in where I work, and we're looking at the numbers. It's terrifying. Yeah, it really is terrifying. As of now, in Zambia, 75% of all disciplinary cases in schools and universities have to do with alcohol. In every residential area in Lusaka right now, you can, I think 150 from wherever you are, every residential area, you can get your hands on alcohol. And before, we used to talk about Chiwolia being the place that was dangerous. But now we've got Chainda, we've got Mutendere, we've got Matero. And right now, almost every family has got a person struggling with an addiction. So it's an issue of, if it's not you, then you know somebody, and that person is close to you. So we used to see all these things on TV, like cocaine, heroin, and everything, but they're in our streets. That's how bad it is. And also, it's the numbers have turned into names now. Yeah. Before we used to have certain figures and would see them, in newspapers, on TV, but now these are people that we know. So it's bad. It really is bad. Yeah.
What age group is mostly impacted the most?
Right now, the funny thing is, of course, there is a huge prevalence among the young people. But right now, the funny thing is, even the older ones are on it. And not long ago, our women were number 1 in the world. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. That's how bad it was. And now, We can see it in a lot of things. GBV, the number of divorce cases escalating. So it's right now it's across all age ranges. Of course, the younger ones, it's more, but I think even the older ones are struggling, and people are just taking to alcohol and drugs.
Yeah, and what proportion? You're clearly highlighting that it's a lot. A lot of people are affected by this. What percentage of that is women? Are the women more like in the Zambian context, whether it's the youth or even the older people? Is it which side is more? Is it the women? Is it the men? From your research,
it's always been the males. The males are dominating in that area, but recently we saw an increase in the number of females using drugs. So before we had females on alcohol, but now there is an increase in the number of females using drugs, which is why as Sanity House, despite having the two, we've had two houses before which are males, and a lot of people were reaching out to us and they didn't know where to take the females, which is why we decided to open the female center. And the response is overwhelming. So it's coming up with the females as well. Yeah.
And there's always, we see the result. We see people getting addicted to drugs. We see people getting addicted to alcohol. What are the triggers? What makes people get into abuse?
I would say a lot of people don't really know how to handle issues to do with mental health. Yeah. I'll give you an example. This is something that I always push for people to understand. When we were growing up, normal Zambian setting, when we were growing up, kids, everybody, number one, knows everything about the Bible.
Yeah.
So spiritually, we are safe. Secondly, almost every kid, like right now, we can approach a kid who's 8, 9, 10 in Zambia, wherever they're from. We ask them, what do you take when you have a headache? They know. What do you take when you have a stomachache? They know. What do you do when you cut yourself? How do you take care of the wound? Everybody knows. So physically, we're safe. So people know what to do whenever they cut themselves physically. They know what to do whenever they harm themselves. So as we are growing, we have this situation where people have advanced as far as physical health is concerned. Everybody knows what to do. I will give you an example. You may not remember the last time you sort of, you may remember the last time you cut yourself. Mm-hmm. You get what I mean, right? You may remember the last time you hurt yourself physically. So my point is, in as much as people know what to do physically, which is why when you're growing up, the physical injuries reduce. What increases, on the other hand, are the psychological injuries, the mental injuries, such as, lack of employment, low self-esteem, things such as addiction, and Valusaka's favorite, heartbreaks. All those things keep increasing.
Vacuum team.
Yeah. Vacuum team.
Vamalav.
Yeah, so all those things, even failure in itself, rejection in any form hurts, whether it's professional or romantic, all those things hurt. And as you're growing, the physical injuries are reducing, but the psychological injuries are increasing. Now, people know what to do whenever they're injured physically, but you ask them, what do you do when you fail? They don't know. What do you do when you lose a loved one? They don't know. What do you do when you feel rejected? They don't know. What do you do when you're going through a heartbreak? They don't know. So as a result, people have all these wounds, which is why we're all looking good and, we're all smelling fresh and everybody's looking happy. But inside, people are scared. People are angry. People are sad. People are lonely. People are disappointed. People are heartbroken. So all these things, once they boil up, they need to let loose on something else. And what's the nearest thing that's accessible, available, and very affordable in Zambia? Alcohol and drugs. So we have a lot of young people, due to challenges with mental health, everybody's just shifting to sort of release stress and pain.
Yeah. So you did highlight, Daniel, and in the earlier conversation about having been expelled from university, and obviously that was very challenging. How did that impact you as an individual, and what lessons have you been able to carry forward from that experience?
I think that was part of the saddest moment in my life because, I went to study medicine in a foreign country. Firstborn, pastor's child. After 7 years, you come back and you're a full-blown addict. So in that moment, I saw my friends graduate. I saw them start interning. I saw various friends who started different careers. I could see this one, gets a job. This one's doing a business. This one's getting married. This one's driving. This one's going on vacation. This one's getting engaged. This one's looking good. So that really made things worse for me. So it wasn't only addiction, the depression came in. And that really affected me so bad. And to the point that I was restarting and getting my life back together again. And I had to go back to school to study public health. I was actually the oldest in my class. These young ones,
Yeah.
And because of the things that I went through and I put my parents through a lot, I had to be knocking to get transport every day. So I went back to, the olden days. Yeah. And I had my mom had my timetable of class, and that's in university. You get what I mean? Yeah. And I had to be checking in with them. I remember the first time I had to be showing results and stuff like that. So it impacted me negatively. But one of the things that I learned is when I went back to start all over again, the lecturers and everybody else considered me first year. Nobody ever looked at me and went like, oh, that guy went through an addiction, this one, this and this. So whenever you're starting anything in life, you at a level with everybody else.
Fresh
you don't
start.
need to, you don't need to look at what's gone back and everything and stuff like that. The second thing that I've learned is never be afraid to take the first step when it comes to anything, because time will still pass. If I didn't go back to school, I still would have been here now, but I don't think I would have been seated with you on this podcast because I was looking at the people that you've had. So that's a plus. And so if I didn't do that, time would have passed. The third and the final thing is I never look at my age whenever I'm doing anything. All I consider is I've got health and I've got energy, and that's enough. So I never really look at my age. Of course, some are successful, they're young, but everybody goes through a crushing moment in life. Pretty much what I went through, that's addiction. Another person's going through a divorce. Another person lost their job. Another person is struggling with a health issue. Another person is struggling with a financial issue. So the storm comes to everybody. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, I'm listening to you, Daniel, and, the victory, which is what you are now, always looks very attractive, very nice. Everybody wants to be associated with it. But there was a back process that happened. The struggling with the withdrawal at the point that you decided to go sober. Could you take us through what were some of the internal challenges that you had to deal with when you were on your journey to being sober?
Fear. Yeah, I was scared. Will I get sober? Because I used to use every 4 to 5 hours. I needed to get high on something. No wonder I was like an all-round user. So it wasn't just one thing. So whether it's alcohol, it's marijuana, it's this and that. Like if it's a prescription medication, pretty much all that. So fear of getting back up and fear of facing the people that I had harmed. And also, I felt like I lost so much time. So my confidence was really, really down. Those were some of the challenges that I struggled with. But the biggest challenge was acceptance. Yeah, accepting that, okay, this is where I am. And that's what a lot of people struggle with. Like, sometimes you just have to go like, yep, this is happening now. Like, there is really nothing I can do. Like, yes, this is me. And a lot of people are in denial, not just in addiction, but a lot of things. Yeah, like you can see you're clearly losing it, but people still believe in that little hope that's there. But I learned to face facts instead of my feelings and face reality instead of whatever it is that I'm going through. So acceptance was a major issue for me. The physical cravings, I had to deal with it. The medication was evolved for me to get rid of physical cravings, but the mental aspect is what I really, really struggled with. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how has your experience, taking your journey from addiction to a recovery coach that you are now, how has that experience shaped the way you are running the sobriety house, the Sanity House? How has that impacted how you offer that service to your clients?
It's been good because I was able to look at myself and look at my journey. And now I have learned to look at other people differently as well. So it's given me a lot of experience as far as looking at other people's addiction is concerned. I'll branch off a bit, and because I have dealt with a lot of addiction. Actually, the number one addiction in Zambia among young people is not alcohol and drugs. So the number one addiction among young people, teenagers to the youths in general, is masturbation, sex, and pornography.
Oh, wow.
Those are the ones that are there. The fastest growing addiction in Zambia is gambling. So if you go to the compounds, you find about 25 to 30 gambling spots. And in each and every one of those, you have about 45 to 50 young people there. That's how serious it is.
Wow.
So I have learned to understand addiction from all perspectives working at Sanity House. I've got to interact with people who are addicted to food, people who are addicted to shopping, and it's just opened my mind up to, a number of things. And it's helped me in a way because I can see myself through other people as well. And I understand the levels at which people are struggling. So those are some of the benefits. And the most priceless thing is seeing somebody get their lives together again. And in that's just amazing.
I will not let you off that one very quickly, Daniel. You talk about masturbation, sex, and pornography being on the rise in our country. And that is worrying because obviously then what generation are we preparing for the future? What do you think is a major cause of that increase in that area?
Lack of education. Yeah, lack of education. We've had this thing of I don't know how to say it without coming off offensive, but I feel we're sort of a bit traditional as a country. Yeah, things are moving fast. Sexual education is something that we need to start addressing. And I always tell parents, look, if you have teenagers, talk to them about it. I grew up in a phase where having feelings was considered a sin. You get what I mean? We always spiritualize things, but certain things are physical. Certain conversations need to be had. So people start out, and now I'll give an example. Access to pornographic material was very limited in my time. Extremely limited in my time. For you to get, I think I've only seen one magazine and maybe like 2-3 tapes and some things that I would see on TV. But right now, it's at the click of their hands. You can just simply type, and teenagers have access to all these things. And the parents check in. No, that's the thing. So we have people who are so curious and they're trying to experiment because parents are not having these conversations with children. And right now, yes, people only pay attention when a person is addicted to drugs and alcohol, and then they leave the others. And then we see somebody turning out pregnant or things happening and people are acting shocked. Yet you never had these conversations with people. And you believe that when somebody's having a certain feeling or when people are growing up and maturing, it's sort of a sin. In the Western world, they do have these conversations, which has reduced in teenage pregnancy, STIs, as well as, a number of other things. But here it's lack of education.
Yeah, definitely there's need for a culture shift for us to talk about these issues a bit more openly as parents as well. Now, substance abuse at whatever level always leaves a trail of broken relationships. How did you navigate the process of rebuilding trust? You talked about your mom having your schedule at the university, and also just your loved ones. There's always this. You look if you're an addict, you are seen a certain way. And I'm sure even after the transformation, the family members might still feel like, no, should we trust you? How have you navigated rebuilding your broken relationships with friends and loved ones?
So addiction affects family members the most because you're seeing somebody you love turn into somebody you never ever thought they'd become. You are seeing somebody practically slowly commit suicide in front of you, and that hurts. You are seeing your brother, your child, your loved one, your husband, your wife slowly disappear. And that brings a lot of heartbreak, that brings a lot of disappointment, that brings a lot of shame. It's an embarrassing thing. And as a result, whenever families or relatives of an addicted person are talking to that person, they tend to be harsh. I deal with a lot of parents who talk about tough love, and it's only the toughness without the love in itself. And that's because of what people go through. So Luckily, I had somebody who's a sponsor, or we call them sponsors, who was able to guide me through everything. And that person made me understand to say it's not everybody that's going to come around and be okay with you. And till that, I still get that. Some people are still hoping like, he's going to go back. You get what I mean? Some of my friends still feel no, I just neglected them, and maybe I think like I'm better than them and everything because I stopped and everything, and they're waiting for me to get back. My family was very supportive. It was easy with them. Unfortunately, there are certain people that I'll never ever get to make amends with because I've hurt them too bad as consequences of my addiction, and they don't want to see eye to eye. But I have reached out to make amends to them, and they're still not buying it. So at the end of the day, that's just what happens. Yeah. The other day I was talking to my mom, and I was telling her I wanted to attend a funeral in Kafue. That was around 22, because the following day I had to leave town. But she told me, no, you can't go. Yeah, so it's that fear that comes with that comes with parents. Every time there's a funeral in my neighborhood, and it's some of my close friends, they don't want to check like, okay, where is this guy? It's 7 years of me being clean and sober, but sometimes they still have that, and I understand where they're coming from. So it all comes back with me understanding to say, look, not everybody's going to come around, and people are still going to see me this certain way. Sometimes family is going to think a certain way, which is still okay. Yeah.
Now, in your journey to sobriety, Daniel, did you ever feel completely hopeless? You did share some of the internal struggles that you had. And what role did faith, strong support systems in terms of friends and family play in carrying you through that period of your life?
I did feel hopeless. You're starting all over again. You're the oldest guy in uni, and now you have to beg for a 50 kwacha for transport. And a couple of years before, you were holding dollars and you're independent and you're in a different country, and you thought you were going to be a doctor and everything and stuff like that. And you are walking to go get on a bus to go to school, and you see your friend driving by, and he has it all figured out. And sometimes your friend gives you a lift and he's talking big. He's talking about meetings, about this and that. And in your mind, you're like, hey, I'm going for a test. Did I study for it? You go to class, you write that test, and you haven't done well. And you're thinking, you're like, hey, what's going to happen? What's going to turn out of me? And you're looking at these depressing statistics of how many people are finding jobs and whatnot and everything. So at a certain point, I just went like, you know what? Let me go back to what was familiar. And what was familiar was me using drugs and taking alcohol, because I never had to worry about anything. I was numb to all emotions. And sometimes, that's what takes people back. But luckily, I had a very supportive family. I had a family that, despite them checking on me and everything, they always encouraged me. Like every single time, my mom would tell me, look, I'm proud of you. And every single time, my dad, despite anything that I did, to him, I was still his son. He would still call me, we would still interact and everything. And my sisters, they'll bring out the positive in me. And that's what kept me going all along. Without those guys, I don't think I would have.
And your faith? You did mention that you are a PK, pastor's kid. What role did faith play in this journey?
Faith came in later on, because in the first 6 months was very difficult. Yeah, was very difficult. And my sponsor used to tell me, look, you can't do anything without God himself. Yeah. And if you're going to, in addiction recovery, we believe, you have to accept that you're powerless over alcohol and drugs and that it ruins your life. But he always told me, if you're going to accept that this thing is so powerful over you, the drugs and the alcohol, that it messed up your life, you need to believe that there's something above that's going to pretty much, control everything. So I came to a realization that I needed God in my life 6 months after sobriety. The first 6 months were really, really difficult, yeah. And since then, I realized, I'm like, look, there are certain things that no amount of knowledge, experience, or science can help. It just needs God's presence. And then I started looking back at the times that I could have lost my life, and it was God that came through. So that's when it did come around. It was a bit shaky again till a year after in my addiction. That's when I was like, okay, yep, I wouldn't be here, and I'm not going to continue if God doesn't come in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, looking back, Daniel, if you could speak to the younger version of yourself, you're looking at the younger version of yourself. and you are literally speaking to yourself on the verge of getting into addiction, what would you say to that young Daniel that's slowly spiraling into addiction?
Ah, that's a difficult one. You know, when I look back, I never even liked that medicine thing, to be honest. I was never really into medicine. I think
Mhm.
it was just something that I was, yeah, it looked cool and everything and stuff like that. To my young self, I think I would have told myself to be more open. Yeah. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was this guy that was very wise and everything and stuff like that. But I I didn't know anything. Yeah, those are the things that I would tell myself. I think the beginning was cool, but I would tell myself at some point where I would have been like, okay, you changed now because now it's getting worse. I think that's the point I would have communicated to myself to go like, hey, look, be accepting of the fact that you're losing control.
Yeah.
At that point, yeah, I could have told myself to stop. Yeah.
And what could you have done differently? What could you have done differently?
I
Is
could
it
have.
seeking support? Is it opening up to people and telling them you're dealing with this issue that's getting out of hand? Because sometimes I tend to think that for people that get into addiction, like you're saying, you feel I'm actually in control of it. I've got grips on this, and then before you know it, you are actually slipping into addiction. What would you have done differently?
Things started going wrong in my life the time that I let go of my spirituality and my relationship with God. I feel at that point I would have held strong. But instead, I was in a space where there was nobody to watch me, and I felt like, you know what, I can do whatever it was that I could do. So at a point where I was supposed to pray the most, I let loose. And I feel I could have maintained that relationship with God, and I wouldn't have listened to, I think, myself. Because for me, it was out of curiosity. It wasn't out of peer pressure and stuff like that, yeah. But I just stopped praying, and slowly but sure, I stopped reading the Bible. And yeah, that's when things started going wrong.
Absolutely. Now, for anyone watching this episode, Daniel, as we come to a close, who's either battling addiction or supporting somebody through addiction, what is the most important message you would want them to take away from your story, having listened to just how this thing started to where you are now?
My message to them is you are not the problem, but your addiction is what's causing problems in your life. Those are two different things. You yourself, you are not the problem. Nobody grows up and says, no, by 20, 21, 22, 23, I'm going to lose everything and mess everything up for myself and pretty much people around me. So it's the addiction. It happens to everybody. If you look at my story, you look at every person struggling with addiction, the pattern is the same. And at the end of the day, addiction only takes you to three places. It's either institutions, which is hospital rehabilitation. It takes you to jail or prison at some point, or it takes you to the mortuary. So there's nothing good out of it. And the messed up thing is all these three places or four places that I mentioned, drinking and using drugs is not allowed. So it's absolutely not worth it. And you too can come out of it. And there are a number of people that are going through recovery. So you too can come out of it. I know there are various reasons why a person may have gone through addiction. You're not responsible for your addiction, but you are responsible for your recovery. And you too can get sober.
Okay. I know, Daniel, my team is signaling me, time is gone, time is gone. This is clearly a part one because I honestly feel that we've only scratched on the issue. So we look forward to calling you back and say, could we do our part two so that we can now really get into the details? Because like you've highlighted, I think alcohol and drug addiction is a real challenge in most homes in Zambia. We would like for you to come, like, what is the procedure if somebody decides to go into rehabilitation, they decides to go into rehab? I am aware that you are running a center. Previously, it was just for men, and you've now opened up a center for women. That is really empowering because we believe that in the spirit of inclusivity, in all spaces, the women must be found as well. And I'm happy that you highlighted also the aspect of mental health around issues of addiction. So really what remains is just for me to thank you for the amazing work that you're doing, Daniel. And probably before I let you go, if you have any final words to somebody who's watching the podcast, struggling with addiction, not knowing where to go for any help, please could you speak to such a one?
Thank you so very much. definitely be glad to be back here.
Thank you.
So thank you so very much. I'm really, really honored and humbled. To anybody seeking help, please come through to Sanity House. You can look for the page on Facebook. It's Sanity House, or you can search for me on Facebook. It's Daniel Mbazima who will be able to respond. And please don't shy away from reaching out. And also, I wouldn't have been here today if my family gave up on me. So if you have somebody struggling with an addiction, please, they need your support. And please just reach out, Sanity House.
Okay. Thank you so much, Daniel. Do keep up the good work, hey?
Thank you.
Okay, so there you have it. I've been talking to Daniel Mbazima. He's actually the owner of Sanity Sobriety House, helping individuals out there that are dealing with alcohol and drug addiction, supporting them through the process to recovery. You've heard, if you need any assistance around drug or alcohol addiction, he is there to support you. Check out on the socials, look for Sanity House, and he'll be ready to receive you. We have come to the end of the podcast for today. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. Please do like and follow our socials, but also would like you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you receive the updates as and when we have new podcasts that have been loaded. I've been your host, Mpunga Chipepo-Simukwai. Do join me next time for another exciting episode. Goodbye and God bless you.